Good afternoon, ladies, and good afternoon, gentlemen. Hope everybody is feeling well and nobody's freezing yet from the temperatures. Listen, what I decided to do, I've had several questions come my way, and one of the ones that has stuck with me and repeatedly, why do I care? Which it actually hit me kind of odd, but here's why I'm so adamant about what I do. I remember things and I bear scars at 76 years old that will be with me until the day I die. I remember the signs saying colored only and white only. I remember the separate schools. I remember having to ride in the back of the bus like I was some inferior product. I remember going to the movie theater and having to sit upstairs, and the only thing people had in common was we were all black. We weren't even black during those periods of time. We were colored. But what I remember the most is walking past a Woolworth lunch counter with my grandmother, and actually kind of hungry because we were downtown, special thing to go downtown. And I wanted to go in and eat. And she said, no, baby. And I couldn't understand why. And she said, because that's not for quote unquote colored folk. That is something that I will never, ever forget until the day I die. And I'm seeing those same things, the division, the hatred, the name calling, the just out and out, just racial bigotry that has taken hold in America, and it's taken hold too quick. And right now, I hate to keep talking about this administration, but I have to. Because what he did as far as the total destruction of the East Wing of the White House was nothing more than criminal. There was no permission. That's not his house. That's the people's house. The history that took place within the East Wing of that White House is irreplaceable. The number of presidents and dignitaries, the number of visitors who came in through the East Wing of the White House. The office of the First Lady was always in the East Wing of the White House. And in true Donald Trump fashion, it has to be bigger than everything. And it is the most garish, tacky, outlandish piece of bullshit I've ever seen in my life. And if that destruction of the White House doesn't make you angry, then something is wrong with you. Your history is being ripped asunder. Started out with the Rose Garden. Fond memories of Jacqueline Kennedy and that Rose Garden. The dignitaries who were hosted in that Rose Garden now looks like a deck at a swimming pool somewhere. The fact that you would not allow someone to come into your home and just dig into your bank account and say, you owe me $230, and I'm going to take it right now. Less known, $230 million, because the man felt grieved that they would actually find documents in a bathroom in Mar-a-Lago. The things that are going on now, yet not even to talk about ICE. American citizens are being arrested and detained on their own home ground. Entire communities are being affected. Babies are being separated from their parents, all in the name of racial purity. So this week, when things don't make sense to me, there's one person that I go to. I trust this man implicitly because he makes sense. So today we're coming back with Dr. Warren Harper, and I couldn't be happier. Hang on. Be right back. You know, before in the past, I've mentioned many, many, many times when things don't make sense to me, I try to get centered. And one of the people that I trust implicitly to help me get to my centering point is Dr. Warren Harper. This man, say he's something else, is beyond special. Dr. Harper, how are you, sir?
Ron, I'm doing fine. And believe me, I have the utmost respect for you as well and for this listening audience.
I thank you. You know, with the things that have taken place this week, let's start off with the total destruction of the East Wing of the White House and the history and the arrogance that it took to do that. But then to follow that up with the highway robbery of $230 million from the American public.
We have to keep in mind that this is pretty stereotypic of someone who is narcissistic and also a sociopath. The idea that he's trying to extract money from the American public because he's felt that he's been wronged in some way, which was not wronged. The information that was used to prosecute him was factual, and therefore it should stand as it is. The bottom line is that he hates to spend his money. And he loves to be able to involve himself in situations whereby he can misconstrue all kinds of information. So therefore, people become very confused about what the reality of it really is all about. The issue of him tearing down these wings, he wants to destroy every aspect of anything that he cannot put his name on that does not have his name. That's one of the characteristics of the narcissistic personality to begin with. If it does not have his name on it, then he is going to tear it down. He's trying so hard to and gaslight the whole country about how he's solving wars all throughout the world and what have you. He's solving nothing. He's solving nothing. Conflicts are constantly ongoing, even in Israel, where the Palestinians are still being bombed and killed on a daily basis. The news media is not going to tell you that because he's got the chokehold on all the major news media to begin with, whereby they're not supposed to even present this kind of information to the American public. And if they do, then he is going to in some way harm them or keep them from being able to expand their business. But tearing down the East Wing and building a ballroom while people are worried about suffering for having beans and rice on the table shows you the deep pathology of what we're dealing with. This is a very troubled mind that basically gives no thought about the consequences of the things that he does to people. Because as far as he's concerned, we're not really humans to begin with. Poor folks are not human beings. And therefore, as I mentioned before, I think on the last time we talked, this is about necropolitics. Necro is death. Politics is
Exactly.
basically the utilization of power to control people and other definitions as well. But anytime you have a necro politician in office, he or she is not going to give a damn about people who are suffering and for people who are just barely holding on. So being in a state whereby we're not going to allow the government to function is fine for him because he's got billions of dollars, probably not as much as he thinks he does, but billions.
Hmm.
And therefore, he can continue to eat steak and caviar and go sneak off to Mar-a-Lago and do all kinds of things while the rest of the people are in a bread line or a food line somewhere. And you and I are worried about how are we going to take care of our brothers and sisters because that's what we're supposed to do in times of crisis. So down of anything is typical of someone who has his kind of demented kind of personality style to begin with, and how it will be Trump's new Mecca, this ballroom.
For some reason,
Mhm.
when he went to France and all of the pomp and circumstance and the grandeur of that stuck with him so much that he wants to replicate the Arc de Triomphe
Isn't that something?
in his name.
In his name. And keep in mind, he also went to Saudi Arabia. And, the Saudis are very good in terms of having opulence, gold everywhere and what have you. And that's just part of who they are. They don't mind showing off and they don't brag about it. It's just there, you know. So, yeah, anytime he sees something that he thinks it tops him, a narcissist has to outdo them and
Mm,
does not care how much money it's going to cost to outdo them. Because in his mind, anything that competes with him has to be outdone and in many instances destroyed or denigrated in some way. So yeah, the art to triumph, yeah, he's going to do that, and he's going to find other things that he wants to build as well, while he's withholding money from Head Start or people programs or anything that he can take the money from. And while the Secretary of War, with his ignoramus ass, is running around the country trying to talk tough all the time,
I know.
it's something, you know, as a former commander in the Navy, I wonder how those officers, those senior military officers felt. I've been around admirals and sixes and up and admirals and generals, and they don't take to being down talked to. They don't, because they are experts in what they do. I've talked to one or two admirals who basically were better psychologists than I am. I mean, they knew people, and that's how they were able to gather that rank because they knew their skill and they knew people. They knew how to use both to basically make things happen. So if I'm sitting there and I've got all these bars up here and I've got all these stars up here, I'm going to get real angry after a while. But I know that here we go. I know that he's waiting for me to flinch or to yawn or anything that I could do that show my passive regard for what he's saying. So at that point, he can say, "Get out of the room."
Exactly. After that, let me just call it what it is. After that clusterfuck at Quantico,
Yes.
I had people asking me, "What do you think is going to happen?" I said, "I'm going to tell you exactly what's going to happen. You are going to have field grade officers say no mas. So right then after that, you had a Marine Corps colonel. He retired. Then you had Admiral Alvin Halsey, who
Hmm.
was the commander of the Caribbean Theater. He said he could not in good conscience follow the orders that had been given to him. And for people who say they love the military so much, how can you not see what's going on?
That's exactly right. How can you not see and how can you not stand to see what's happening? And they do see. I think the majority of them do see, and they're wondering how they're going to maneuver in this kind of a pathological cesspool of an environment at this point. All these admirals and generals have a little narcissism in them as well. Keep that in
True,
mind. They
true.
do. And as I've said many times to listening audiences, two narcissists cannot remain in the same space. So at some point, somebody, and I think the military is going to have to be the ones that pull us out of this mess and by whatever means necessary. They have to do that because the police departments are not big enough. He has his own law enforcement agency now with all these people that he's hired who were ex persons from January 6th riot, his own police force and what have you. So it's going to take the military to plan this takeover of the country for the good of the people in the country.
The one question that I knew I had to ask you, Dr. Harper, because I knew you, if anybody could come up with something that made sense. How can we as a society have regressed so far back and forgotten so much about the people who have sacrificed and died and bled to give us rights and freedom? How can we give up that so knowingly and readily in this nation?
Well, I think people of color didn't pass on the information about how we got to that point of having the civil rights and voting rights and what have you. We didn't do it in a strong enough way. I think we allowed ourselves to come off of the tower and where we were watching and making sure that things were going to stay in place, and we kind of just mellowed out a bit. So I think to a large extent we didn't do our job in terms of educating our children and our children's children about the struggles that we went through and that they were still going through. But although dad and mom are both working, you don't see how difficult it is to go through this. Now, on the other hand, for other people who are anti people of color, and even many whites, they didn't want this to happen to begin with in terms of people having rights and people thinking that they're citizens of this country,
Hmm.
particularly people who have birthright citizenship. They didn't want this to happen at all. As you and I can probably agree, what's going on now was not something that just started when we had Project 2025. This is
Hmm.
a 50-year, maybe 100-year plan to retake over the control of people who are non-white and who are not Christian nationalists or whatever religion they're trying to establish. So I think to a large extent we've been fighting this and we've been fighting it in a way that wasn't strong enough as
Hmm.
people of color, but also it's been a growing cancer to begin with. And keep in mind, a lot of the things that he says and he's doing, there are a lot of people, a lot of Americans that want to see this done, but they don't want to see it done in this drastic and such a vicious and vile way. But see,
Exactly.
they do want to see those quote those immigrants. They do want to see these black cities, and black states or whatever that might mean, put in their place because we can't have these people running around robbing and killing and what have you. Well, we ought to start taking a look at some of the mass murderers around here and who and what they're doing too, because they're not coming from blue states or they're not African American or people of color.
Hmm.
We have to get back into thinking about this country being for the people by the people. It has to be.
Amen.
It has to be.
Amen.
You know.
I brought up the point that with the destruction of the East Wing, of course, somebody from MAGAville, the Make America Grown Again people, said, "Well, President Obama changed the tennis court." Yeah, he took down a net, he restriped the tennis court, and he put up two basketball nets. That was really a whole, and it seems to be this tit for tat thing, and it's all
Mhm.
based on race. This is the question I'm getting to: are we at heart a racist nation?
Yes, we are. And it's never been anything but that. Anytime you have a majority of, well, more than majority, 99% of the Caucasian men who were in a room and basically came up with the Constitution, and you had one black face who no one even can see him on the back of the $2 bill, and even he was not for giving any rights to people who've been stolen away from the continent of Africa. So we've always been that, and there have been moments where we kind of peeked out from that and saw that there was some hope during the civil rights movement. No, right after the Civil War, when we had the first Civil Rights Act that was passed, and we had black senators in office and from some of the southern states, and we had the Freedmen's Bureau who basically helped to build schools and hospitals and things like that. But then that cloud came back over us again, which was never gone to begin with. Came back over us, and there we find ourselves now back to even worse than where we were before. We were.
Amen.
So yes, it
Amen.
has always been a racist society, and it has also been a society that wants to not only control but to get rid of people of color.
Lord, that just hit me. Doc, you have this effect on me. You make my brain work overtime. So it's like we both know that there's this low turnout in the African American community.
Yes.
When when is enough for Black folks to stand up and realize that the power that they have as a whole is unbelievable?
You know, Ron, I'm afraid that I don't have a good response to that because I was out on the corner of Poplar. Uh, well, people don't know that that's one of the streets. I was out last week for the march and for
Hmm.
the protest, and I didn't see very many of us. I did not see very many of us out there, African Americans nor Latin American people. I saw a large number of Caucasian people out there, and I got out there and got my signs and hung them up because we didn't march. We stopped at a corner. It was a huge number, but it was not any of us there. So the sad reality, I don't have very much to say about that because it's almost as if black folks are walking around looking for something to change overnight and hoping that Ron and Dr. Harper are going to ride in on our horse and kind of slay the dragons and everything is going to be fine. It's not going to be. It's going to get terribly worse. And the sad reality, as you and I both know, when things get bad in the black community, we don't get political. We get angry at each other. And all of a sudden that anger and rage is manifested in more shooting, killings, robbings, and what have you. So if we can get focused, if we can focus that anger and rage into some constructive action, more protests, but also using the dollar in terms of forcing these corporations, these companies to stop going along with them,
Yes, sir.
then maybe we can make some headway. But I think we're in a deep, deep hole of shit.
I've always said that a pimp has to have a boogeyman. And for Trump, who's using pimp tactics, oh, baby, I'm going to make everything, Big Daddy's going to make everything fine for you. I'm just going to get rid of all these brown people over here, the Latinos. Okay. And the problem is once he's done there, then who's next? Black folks.
So that
You're
well,
it.
the first day in office, he struck down uh what is referred to is affirmative action. He struck that
Roger.
down. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
they call it something else, but it's affirmative action. And not knowing that the majority of the people that benefited from that particular program were Caucasians to begin with, but that didn't matter because he wanted to make a sharp blow and let black people know I'm coming after you. There's also some things he's done in terms of not funding certain Latino programs recently, and not supporting those programs. And I got one article where he's talking about now, well, not him, but the author of the article is talking about the next is black HBCUs. They're coming after them now. They're already coming after the white major universities, as I'm sure you're aware of, by having
Very
them
aware.
sign a kind of a compact that they will change their curriculum along around American values or whatever concept they're using now to describe their pathology
Hmm.
and the taking away of true knowledge from our school system. But there are some universities that are fighting back and they're refusing to sign it. But there are other universities that are going to need that money, and I'm sure that there'll be more and more of the smaller colleges which will basically allow him to take over their curriculum. And believe me, they're coming after HBCUs. And although HBCUs will allow anyone of any ethnicity to come in, they'll claim that they are segregation schools.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Dr. Harper, I can't thank you enough for consenting to be my guest here again. Again, like I said, when my head starts to dance around, you're the first brother I look for. So again, much pride and much admiration. Dr. Warren Harper's out of the state of Tennessee, my home state, and proud of it. So thank you, Doc.
Anytime.
The one segment that I was adamant about doing for my podcast is what I like to call a ring of honor. And these are people who have gone above and beyond the call of duty. Doesn't have to necessarily be somebody in the military. It might be a teacher. It might be an educator. It might be a police officer. It could be anybody. But these are people who have done that extra something special. This week does happen to be military, which is obviously near and dear to my heart. Master Sergeant Raul Roy Benavidez, an airborne at the Special Forces. Look him up. He spent 6 hours in hell. The things that this man did in the name of protecting his brother is superhuman, absolutely superhuman. Look him up. Master Sergeant Raul Roy Benavidez. Viva la raza.
Roy Benavidez, August 5th, 1935 to November 29th, 1998. He was an United States Army soldier who was awarded the Medal of Honor for his valorous actions in combat near Loc Ninh, South Vietnam, on May 2nd, 1968, while serving as a member of the United States Army Special Forces during the Vietnam War. A member of the 82nd Airborne Division, 5th Special Forces Group, 6 hours in hell. On May 2nd, 1968, a 12-man Special Forces patrol, which included 9 Montagnard tribesmen, was surrounded by an NVA infantry battalion of about 1,000 men. Benavidez heard a radio appeal for help and boarded a helicopter to respond. Armed only with a knife, he jumped from the helicopter, which was 30 to 40 feet off the ground, carrying his medical bag, and ran to help the trapped patrol. He sustained 37-plus wounds and saved at least 8 lives. Cover Your 6 podcast salutes this hero. Thank you, Sergeant Roy Benavidez, a Latino.